This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 831, recorded on June 30th, 2021. How hot can it get? Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we will fill your heads with heat, heads, and hope. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer. Everything, and I do mean everything, is more complicated than you think it is. It's comfortable to know things, put them in boxes of identifiable categories and say, this is this, that is that. And it pretty much works. The more we simplify and the more confident we are at it. So it's kind of hard to say that there's anything wrong with this strategy because it works for pretty much everything that we know. But lest we forget, here's a quick reminder. All the things we put into boxes are not actually in those boxes. Reality is complicated, and every slice of the complicated is itself complex. And within the complex slice of complicated, there are nuances from which new complications can arise. And even when we get to the point where we are truly understanding an aspect of a nuance in a complex slice of the complicated, we remember that it's all connected in ways we barely comprehend, and this realization should serve as a reminder that whenever you hear a very simple answer to any question, chances are it is either mostly incorrect or another episode of This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I wanna learn everything. I wanna fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I wanna know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki. Blair's back!
Hello!
We missed you, Blair.
I missed you. I'm so happy to be back.
So excited that you are back again, Blair. Welcome back.
Thanks. I had to take the animal quarter back from Justin, so it was out of my hands.
You better. And we have a good episode with Blair's Animal Corner right where it should be, in the corner. No, coming up. We have lots of great stories. I have stories about brains, because I love the brains coming up at the end of the show. I've got some hope for malaria, maybe, and also a little bit of neutron star eating. Oh, and it's hot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
I heard
What'd you
it's
bring,
hot
Justin?
up there in the Pacific Northwest.
Hot. It's been. Yes, it's better, but it's been. But Justin, what do you have?
I've got not one, but two ancient, archaic human evolution-y findings stories this week. Glow-in-the-dark mRNA,
Ooh.
and guess who loves global warming? It's gonna be
Not
snakes.
me.
It's going to be snakes. It's about snakes liking global warming.
Oh, Blair, what's in the animal corner?
Oh, I have a story about snakes too, but this is about spiders that eat snakes. I also have...
Wait.
Man-
Wait. I'm sorry.
What?
I have to
Yeah.
correct you. You
Yeah.
misspoke.
Yeah.
Your story is about snakes that like to eat spiders, but you
Incorrect.
unfortunately...
No. Incorrect.
What?
We'll get there. Also, I have a story about mantids that take a doom-filled dip, and I also have hot birds.
Hot birds. Let's
Mhm.
tweet about it. Okay. Anyway, it is time for the show. But before we get started, I do want to let you all know that if you have not yet subscribed to This Week in Science, you can do that all places that podcasts are found. Look for This Week in Science, TWIS. You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter. We are TWIS Science in some places, so search for TWIS Science if you don't find us under This Week in Science. And our website is twis.org. All right, let's dig in to the heat, to the hotness. It's getting
How
hot
hot is
in
it?
here. How
How
hot
hot
is it?
is
It's
it?
so hot. Man, it's been breaking records right and left. And if anybody out there has been keeping track of what has been going on, it is once in a millennium event. And as we've talked about, so many of these hurricanes occurring in other places around the world, heat waves and droughts are also extreme weather events that occur more often thanks to climate change. So we've got record temperatures, we've got fires, we've got permafrost melt. Hey, Siberia, what's going on there? And these are just a few of the predictions that are coming true sooner than expected because of our warming climate. And the big question is, will this once in a millennia event in the Pacific Northwest, and actually across the entire West, will it happen more often? Will heat domes that cause ground temperatures like the one reached in Washington state of 145 degrees Fahrenheit to be reached more often? Normally, the temperature is what's called a dry bulb temperature. You have a thermometer that is a few feet, 4 or 5 feet above the ground. It's testing the air temperature. It's not touching the ground. It's not going to be influenced by concrete or the ground temperature itself emanating the heat. So they've got it high enough up that hopefully it's just a measure of air temperature. We hit temperatures in Portland, Oregon of 116 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures were reached. The hottest temperature in the Pacific Northwest was reached at about, I think it was 123 degrees Fahrenheit.
So that is
in British Columbia.
That is Death Valley
Yes.
desert hot temperatures.
Yes. These
You're
are
not
temperatures.
supposed to ever get those there.
No, and the infrastructure is not built to deal with these temperatures.
gosh.
So we
No
also
one
had
has an air
buckling
conditioner.
roads. And
wow.
yeah, there are stories of, Siberian permafrost melting and how that's going to impact buildings in Siberia, in Russia, how it will affect
yes.
the railroads, how it will affect the roadways. But we often here in America think of, that's a far-off Siberian tundra. That's not here. It's not in America.
Canadian problems.
It's a Canadian problem. Well, no, it's also an American problem.
I'll tell you what else is an American problem is wildfires, specifically on the West Coast here. And with the extremely dry winter that we had, and now with these temperatures. Oh, and it's a holiday this weekend where people like to set things on fire. I have concerns.
So,
I think we all thank you to our friends at We Have Concerns. But yes, we have concerns.
one of the things that we have brought up on the show a few times is the fact that there is a difference between weather and climate. But the sort of interesting thing that gets pointed out is that record-breaking temperature is actually kind of a normal thing. It happens across our country every year. It's the coldest day, it's the hottest day it'll happen. What's different and is available in that data is the number of hot days that are records increasing, while the number of cold days, they're showing up still in smaller numbers, but they're showing up in new places where they weren't having as many. So it is, again, complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated. And one of the issues that came up here is that, it was a hot day, 116 degrees, but it cools off at night, right? You'll cool down at night. That didn't happen. Temperatures were above 70 degrees all night long, which that's the normal. That's high. 70 degrees
Like the
is
high
higher than the
for
average
Portland.
temperature for June in Portland, Oregon. So, so what we're experiencing is the kind of weather that is made possible because of a change in threshold due to climate change. But we have this change in weather that results in higher daytime temperatures and also higher nighttime temperatures. And life has a hard time rebounding when those temperatures don't drop at night. So lots of things to talk about here and to consider. But Blair, you brought up the big point. At this weekend in the United States is a big weekend for fireworks and explosives and incendiary devices.
Wait,
and if
whoa,
you
whoa,
are
whoa.
in
We're not
the
still
West,
doing that, are we?
no, if you are in the
Oh,
West,
man.
please refrain.
Leave it to the
Because
professionals.
you don't
want
wanna
to
be the
do
person.
a fireworks thing. Watch it. Don't set off neighborhood fireworks. You don't want to be the reason that all of California or Oregon or Washington goes up in a giant Because everything's so dry and hot.
Yep. Don't be the next cause of an Eagle Creek fire. All right. But anyway, everyone, stay well, stay cool. Let's try and avoid having other places around the world become like Jacobabad, Pakistan, where the temperatures reach above 50 degrees Celsius on a regular basis in the summertime with humidity and get higher than is possible for the human body to survive.
Wow.
We don't want that to happen anywhere else. We don't even want it to happen there. So climate change is a big part of it, and we need to start making our moves with organizations that can help make changes. Talk to your legislators. This is a science and policy issue. Regulations and corporate incentives can help make a huge difference in what happens down the road.
One other thing I want to mention is that you just said the roads are buckling because of heat. Yep. So here's the proof, the written out, very obvious proof that climate change consideration is infrastructure. And so when we talk about infrastructure funding through the government, and you want to separate it out from this divisive thing called climate change, we don't want to talk about it. This is part of infrastructure. It has to be part of the conversation. It has
We're around the country dealing with aging infrastructure that was potentially not created. It was 60, 70, 80 years ago, was possibly built, not with these extreme weather events in mind. So there's a lot that needs to be. Great point, Blair. All right, Justin, we're using our big brains to tell everybody about, what's happening here. But did you find a brain or a skull, a cranium?
So I didn't find it, but there has been a new human skull found in China. It's a new human. It's got its own species and everything, but it might not be a new species, but it might be. As the story goes so far, skull was discovered back in the 1930s in Harbin City in China. At the time, the man who found it thought it might be special, but decided to wrap it up and toss it into a well, because that's what you do. Also, they were under Japanese occupation and thought that turning it over would disappear it from anybody's ability to appreciate the thing. So, on the deathbed, tells the grandchildren, oh, by the way, the well we've been drinking out of all these years, I might have thrown a skull in it some 80, 90 years ago. So anyway, 2018, grandchildren find this, they turn it over to paleoanthropologists, and it turns out it is the largest ever Homo skull ever found. It's also one of the most complete skulls in the record, and as big as that is, it's even going to be probably a little bit bigger of a controversy, I guess. I'm sort of hedging whether it's going to be a controversy or it's just science going to do its due diligence, but Chinese scientists are saying the skull represents a newly discovered human species named Homo longi, or Dragon Man, which I appreciate. The Dragon Man is the cooler name, so I'm already voting to go with that no matter what. But is it new? Or is it the first skull of a Denisovan ever found? That's what the conversation is going to be about going forward. Previously discovered hominin, known just by the finger bone and a partial mandible. I think there's a little bit of a skull cap out there too. But lots of genetic information. We got DNA from the toe. I think we got it from the jaw as well. And we have tracked Denisovans through peoples of Southeast Asia who have Denisovan ancestry. So there's also something called Homo daliensis that's in the region, which is another ancient human. So it's another thread to be pulling on there. Two things to keep in mind. One, the controversy is totally meaningless. Doesn't matter what the thing is called at this point. Right now, it does not matter. What we need to just do is study the thing. Two, it's really cool. So some of the findings of this skull is that it's definitely not human, but it has features that are much more current modern human than maybe we would have expected if it is a Denisovan. Says researcher Huang Ji, professor of paleontology, Hebei Geo University. This fossil preserved many morphological details that are critical for understanding the evolution of the Homo genius and the origin of Homo sapiens. Which, again, origin of Homo sapiens, it's being almost looked at as like an ancestor. There's some claims that it's more of an ancestor to modern humans than Neanderthal. All of this is morphology. There is no DNA extracted at this point. It's possibly there, but they haven't done it. And even if it shows up and it is a Denisovan, it's not going to be a human ancestor. There is ancestry for modern humans that have some of this, so it is some of our ancestry, as Neanderthal is. But, it's the braided stream all the way throughout all of this conversation.
So this head is big, though, you're saying. It's a big head.
It's a big head, which kind of they're saying matches up with that big jawbone or mandible partial mandible that they found in Tibet.
Because how tall are Denisovans? They're shorter than us, right?
Well, we don't know.
Maybe not. Yeah.
That's the thing. With this big skull, the biggest Homo skull ever found, there is some desire to call it taller or bigger, right? More robust.
But they could also just have big heads.
Yes, exactly. So Neanderthal has a little bit larger cranium than a current modern human, but they weren't thought to be exceptionally tall. They were thought to be sort of stocky. And they're not thought to be, but we found skeletons. We've put the pieces together and we can tell they're not giants. There's some more quotey here. Like Homo sapiens, they hunted mammals and birds and gathered fruits and vegetables and perhaps even caught fish. I don't know. I mean, you can learn a lot from a skull. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff here that has me scratching my head about how the conclusions have been bridged from skull to everything else that's in this. There isn't any other information on this one about other tools or any artifacts that are associated with this because they don't have the site. Remember, this was found, and the location is being told where it's found, is part of how they've also traced it to being about 148,000 years old, at least, maybe older, because of the sediments that the person who found it said he was digging out, I think, to make a bridge or something like this. It was a construction site. So they went and tested soil there, but we are 90-ish years, 80, 90 years away from the discovery. That wasn't really well documented. We have word of mouth stuff. So there's a lot of this is a great, terrific, amazing find. And there's all this missing data that doesn't allow us to do what we would normally do if we had a find of this caliber. So more to come out. But it does remind me that earlier this year, I teased out a statement by a bunch of people in the field who were saying there's big stuff coming in Asia that's going to change everything. And this may be what was being hinted about.
Yeah, I mean, what it comes back to, though, is, if you come across something like this, don't hide it and think about whether you should turn it over. If you want to help the scientific community, then this kind of a find, you have to be able to, you stop, you alert people, you let them assess the site. I mean, probably what happened is the skull was taken, everything else was excavated for the bridge or whatever, and a lot of other evidence was lost.
Right. However, I will say, so part of this is in the 1930s, and it was very exciting time for this is when, I think this is like during Piltdown Man, but it's also Neanderthal discoveries were first emerging. Like, it was kind of global news that there was this exciting past that was being found. It's possible that by not turning over this skull that could have been a trophy or it could have been destroyed or who knows what fate it had, just by accident, I think it turned out okay.
What I want to know is, in the 1930s, what kind of wrappings existed that maintained this thing at the bottom of a well for 90 years?
That's
Because they didn't have Ziploc bags. What? Wild.
Just put it in a bucket, threw it in the well. All right,
I want to know what else is down there. Like, this is guy's safety deposit vault.
I bet there are a bunch of spiders down there.
Oh,
maybe some snakes.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what's wild? Spiders eat snakes. Did you know this?
What?
No.
Yeah. So spiders eat snakes.
Now,
this is something that apparently the scientific community knew. Nobody told me. But so spiders eat snakes. And first you're thinking like big spiders, tiny snakes, right? No. So this was specifically looking at what spiders eat snakes, what snakes they're eating, what their relative body sizes are, and where they live. Because this was a consolidated, analyzed study of snake-eating spiders around the world. Around the world. This was...
Can I guess? Is it
what are
really
you guessing?
Really big spiders, really small snakes?
No, I just said
That's it?
That's not what it was.
It's not?
No. So, so this is over 300 reports all over the world. They eat snakes. Spiders eat snakes on every continent except for Antarctica. Shh. Don't tell them.
Because there's no spiders in Antarctica or snakes.
Yeah, and no snakes. So it tracks. But 80% of incidents were either in the U.S. or... Where do you
Australia.
think? Australia. You got it. Of course. Where all the terror animals are. In Europe, hey, I can't wait to go to Australia one day. I'm obsessed with Australian animals overall, but they have a lot of deadly things, so I'm not surprised. But in Europe, less than 1% of the reported incidents occurred, so there's not a lot going on in Europe with spider-eating snakes, and mostly it is some of those teeny tiny non-venomous snakes in the blind snake family. They look like giant worms, kind of. They're the ones being eaten by spiders. But in Americas and Australia, there are spiders from 11 different families catching and eating snakes. This is not an unusual thing that happens. So it's a pretty diverse kind of phylogeny of these spiders all over the world. And what they found was that overall, the spiders eating the bigger snakes had, no surprise, stronger venom. But specifically, it appeared venom that was good for us. So stuff that could incapacitate or kill humans, also helpful against snakes. So these spiders, like I said, they were 11 different families. They can outfight snakes from 7 different families. So this is a pretty diverse response. And those snakes can be 10 to 30 times their size. Imagine taking something down and eating part of something 30 times your size.
That would be one big pizza.
Yeah.
So if we're doing some rounding, I can do this in my head right now. So let's say a 200-pound human, right? Times 3 is 600. So we're talking about a 6,000-pound animal. So we're talking like a rhinoceros. Like imagine hunting and eating part of a rhinoceros with like no tools. Pretty well. But
I'm just going to bite you.
Yeah, anyway, the largest snakes caught by spiders were 1 meter in length. That's approximately 3 feet. That's a pretty standard size snake. And on average, they were about 26 centimeters. So you can think about that as about 10 inches. Most of the snakes caught were very young. So that was the thing, is they were young. They were freshly hatched snakes. They were perhaps foolhardy, not as good at getting away. And the venom from these spiders often were key. The black widows, brown widows, and the redbacks in Australia were all really good at doing this because they have that extremely strong neurotoxin, but also because they have very strong webs. And so there is some overlap here with the spiders that are dangerous to humans and the spiders that attack snakes. And so we think that has something to do with the fact that the neurotoxins on vertebrates can be kind of catch-all. There's definitely a lot of overlap on what works on a snake and what works on a human because we have spinal cords and very similar nerve systems, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We come from, we come from a similar place.
We're all just fish.
So
when you boil down, when you look far
when you
back
go back, we're not that far back from each other.
Okay, so the one thing there's a couple of things. I have too many things. Snakes, I know, eat insects, right? So snakes would typically be something that might hunt a spider.
Not a lot.
Okay, but is this a defense mechanism or is this a hunting strategy?
No, they're eating. Yeah,
they're chowing down on them. This is not like you got too close, so I bite you so I don't get disturbed.
No, this is a really good question. So they'll catch a snake and they will sit there and eat for hours to days.
Wow.
That being said, when they abandon it while there's still some left, ants, wasps, flies, molds come and take the rest. but they do eat for hours to days.
It's a community meal. It's a community food bank.
And these guys, like snakes, also, interesting correlation between the two. They're very like boom and bust with their feeding strategies. So spiders can eat a lot and then not eat for a very long time. So can snakes. Very interesting. So they obviously a lot more research is needed to find out what components of their venoms target vertebrate nervous systems, but they actually think this initial study could help learn about those neurotoxins and help us with antivenoms for spider bites for humans, and just understanding more about vertebrate nervous systems in general, because we also use venoms sometimes to develop medicine, right? So all of that together means that this information, kind of cataloging what spiders eat, what snakes, could help with that a lot, because about 30% of the snakes that they attack are also venomous. They can eat venomous snakes as well, which is just
my venom's
wild.
better than your venom.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, back to Australia, brown snakes in the same family as cobras, considered one of the most venomous snakes in the world, get eaten by redbacks, which are Australian black widows. So,
okay, so my new plan then for the perimeter fence of Science Island is to have it also be a black widow sanctuary.
I don't know about that. I feel like that might.
I think that would. I would choose spider over snake. Oh, a venomous spider over a venomous snake.
Ooh, I would not.
Any day.
I would definitely not. You can plop a snake in a cooler. You can pick it up with a big stick. You're pretty good.
You can. I'm not getting anywhere near it. Spider,
That's what
I'm
I'm
scared
for.
of.
Don't even worry about it.
Okay. I'm like, I got traumatized by one, but I've been traumatized by a rattlesnake. That's all I'm gonna say.
Speaking of things that like to eat other things, what about black holes? Not black widows, but even bigger objects. Yeah, black holes. They're just like, nom, nom, I want to eat everything. And we've talked previously about discoveries made by LIGO and Virgo, our gravitational wave detectors that have detected black holes merging with one another. Also detected neutron stars merging with one another. Also detected different sizes of black holes. And so there's all sorts of these new ideas like, ooh, there's a bunch of variety out there of things merging with other things. The one hypothetical situation that they had not yet discovered was a black hole eating a neutron star. But now they have found it. They have discovered, yes, ripples in the gravitational waves that have jostled our planet gently in space-time. Using LIGO and Virgo together, they were able to detect 2 instances of black holes devouring neutron stars. Now, when we've previously seen a neutron star merger, there were detectors that detected the light that was emitted at the time of these stars twirling together. And so there was a gamma ray burst that could give all sorts of information out at the same time. But, for these, we weren't lucky enough yet that we know of to have captured any of the light frequencies that would be indicative of what actually happened. So just dealing with gravitational wave analysis at this point in time. But these 2 things, they have 2 signals. The stronger signal triggered all three LIGO Virgo detectors on the 15th of January, 2020. And it was a black hole that they estimate to be about the size, mass of 6 suns.
Oh, it's a little baby one.
Not too big. It ate a neutron star that was only about a sun and a half in mass.
This is a baby interaction.
Very baby, yeah. And then 10 days prior to that, they found that they had seen other evidence of a 9 solar mass black hole merging with a neutron star of 1.9 solar masses. These happened 1 billion light years ago.
So
these distant, ancient events. Anyway, the researchers are now... They're questioning whether or not black hole mergers, whether it's a black hole with a black hole or black hole with a neutron star, whether or not they always give off some kind of light emission, whether there's always some gamma ray burst or something. And they've determined that black holes often rotate a lot more slowly than they expected them to. And like it's the rotation of the black hole that determines how quickly a neutron star gets devoured and how close it can get to the black hole before it gets devoured. Because if it's rotating really, really, really fast, it's just going to start ripping stuff together pretty quickly. So anyway, they've discovered that according to their merger gravitational wave data, there are some very fast spinning black holes out there, but there are others that, and the majority of them they found so far, which is not many yet to really base a universal standard on, but it seems as though a lot of them spin fairly slowly, much more slowly than originally anticipated. So now researchers are looking to hopefully find light from a black hole neutron star merger. They haven't done yet. Okay, do you have another human?
So, as if one ancient human ancestor, archaic human story wasn't enough, analysis of recently discovered fossils found in Israel suggests that interactions between different human species were even more complex than previously believed, unless you are a longtime listener to this show, in which case, you know it's pretty darn kind of used to it. They are suggesting that at least some of the Neanderthals' ancestors came from the Levant. Research team led by Tel Aviv University published their findings in Science, are describing recently discovered fossils from a site called Nesher Ramla in Israel. This site dates to around 120 to 140,000 years ago. Fossils found by Dr. Zaidner of the Hebrew University during excavations of Nesher Ramla. They were digging down 8 meters, so they were way down deep. And they found large quantities of animal bones, horses, deer, cows, stone tools, and lots of human bones. Human fossils consist of a partial cranial vault and a mandible. Researchers made some virtual reconstructions of the fossils to compare those with other fossils from Europe, Africa, Asia. The results suggest that the Nesher Ramla fossils represent late surviving populations of humans who lived in the Middle East during the Middle Pleistocene period. This is quoting Rolf Quam, who's a Binghamton University anthropology professor, who's also part of this. The oldest fossils that show Neanderthal features are found in Western Europe. So, researchers generally believe Neanderthals originated there. However, migrations of different species from the Middle East into Europe may have provided genetic contributions to Neanderthal gene pools during the course of their evolution. Other fossils from this approximate time period are difficult to classify taxonomically because they seem to be mixes of Neanderthal and modern human. This is one of the regions where we know humans and Neanderthals intermingled. But these fossils seem more Neanderthal-like in the mandibles and less Neanderthal-like in the cranial vault, but both clearly distinct from modern humans, which is sort of, again, a pattern that's sort of been matching both Neanderthals and humans, where diagnostic skeletal features of each species here first in the facial region and then later on in the cranial vault. We change our face before our brain sac. Describing the significance of the find, Dr. Hershkovitz said, "It enables us to make new sense of previously found human fossils, add another piece to the puzzle of human evolution, and understand the migrations of humans in the old world, even though they lived so long ago." The researchers did not attribute the find at Nesher Ramla fossils to a new species. Rather, they grouped them together with all of those earlier fossils at several sites that have been difficult to sort of classify because they're looking at admixtures of Neanderthal and current modern humans, very likely. They're just basically saying, we found a melting pot of human and Neanderthal here in the Levant.
Which makes sense. There would be a melting pot. There was overlap. This all makes sense, but
there's overlap, and there's also a bottleneck. Of the Middle East between Africa, Asia, and Europe. It's sitting in a very, very good spot for different humans to have run into together over
right.
years.
Yeah. It's cool. I love the virtual reconstruction stuff that they did. trying to put together based on because we always wonder, it's like, okay, you have these bone fragments. How do you put together what the rest of the skull looks like? And so to create these virtual reconstructions, maybe they're starting to get there a little bit more. I don't know. That's really interesting.
But there still does seem to be a lot of like, and I guess.
Well, if it's this big here and you've got this notch here, it's probably this big here.
Yeah, which there's so much, it's very calculated assumption, and I understand that. But it is still assumption, which is very interesting. Like these guys could have had like a huge flat head that's not in proportion with the area around their eyes and could have squished. But they were like, well, it's probably around the shape of all these other skulls that we've seen, which makes sense. But there's always weird outliers, It's
and we have such diversity within humans too that it's whenever you find one skull, like okay, they found the biggest hominid skull ever in China. Maybe that was the biggest human. But ratios over all of the skulls that we have found over all of the when it starts to fit pretty nicely again into these boxes and categories, and we label it and we narrow it down and say, aha, that's it. But then you're right, we probably are still missing a lot.
It's all statistics. The margin of error.
Yeah, things that are statistics, but in practice a lot more is vaccine development. And one important vaccine that we've had so much trouble getting a vaccine, even considering how many people are affected by the parasite every year, is a vaccine from malaria. And there have been clinical trials for some vaccines, but there really is not anything other than the parasital medications that are used currently to be able to get rid of the parasite infection. But resistance is coming up. And so a vaccine would be really great to be able to fight off malaria. Well, there is a new, very small, like 56 people in this very small clinical trial that has taken place. And it's for a vaccine, Sanaria's PFSPZ vaccine. Now, this vaccine is very old school in the way it goes about being a vaccine. It's not all fancy mRNA like the new versions. This is going back to inoculating with virus. This vaccine, there are 3 types. They're generated creating live parasite from mosquito salivary glands, which is very unique. And they, for PFSPZ, which is the one they're looking at, the virus is irradiated. So they use radiation to kill the virus. So it's live but dead.
Freshly dead.
Freshly dead. Only freshly dead, yes. And then there are a couple of other ones. PFSPZ-GA1 has a genetically weakened parasite that gets injected. And then PFSPZ-CVAC is injected into somebody who is on malaria drugs, anti-malarials. Very interesting strategies for how they're going about doing this. However, that said, this limited trial of 56 volunteers, the participants were either taking pyrimethamine, let me get the word right, pyrimethamine, which kills liver stage parasites, or chloroquine, which kills blood stage parasites. And they found that higher doses of the vaccine resulted in efficacy in stopping or blocking infection of up to 87.5%.
Wow.
Which is the
really
highest.
Good. Yeah.
It's really good. This is the highest ever achieved for any malaria vaccine. It's, again, a really small trial. This trial was basically in a very limited situation. This isn't real world application. So if you're going to apply it in Brazil or Africa, you're going to come across people who are eating different diets, who have different ecological, environmental factors. There might be other parasites in their blood that could limit the effectiveness of the vaccine. We don't know any of those things yet, but it's appeared very, in a limited sense, effective, this is, a little bit of hope for malaria. The researchers who are involved, though, they keep saying, and maybe it'll get there someday, malaria infects hundreds of thousands of people around the world every year. It just doesn't affect anybody in America.
Mhm.
So there's no Operation Warp Speed for a malaria vaccine. But if there were, they think they could probably get a vaccine within 5 years.
And otherwise, we're just going to keep throwing mosquito nets at people.
Yeah. And mosquito nets and anti-malarials can be effective.
Mhm.
The World Health Organization just announced that China is malaria-free. They went the last 3 years with 0 indigenous infections. And that has been through a very, very stringent program of monitoring, of using anti-malarial medications, of genotyping strains that they find in infected people in the country. So it was a long, hard road, but China reached 0 malaria.
It's one of those things that you're right. We don't think about or talk about much in the United States. It's not just, it's not just a random occasional thing that has an outbreak somewhere. It's kind of like an omnipresent disease.
And as climate change happens, it will reach places like the United States. It will reach the rich countries that have been, have escaped the effects so far. So we are short-sighted to ignore problems like these.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. This is This Week in Science. Thank you for listening to the show. We hope that we give you a little hope for the world with all the science that we bring week in and week out. If you like the show, please recommend it to a friend. Let's come on back for a little COVID update.
Is it a good one? Should I go?
I think it's a fairly good one.
Oh, good.
So our CDC director, Walensky, is doubling down on her view that people in the United States who are vaccinated should be able to go mask-free, even with the rising cases of Delta variant, which is now up to 20% of all reported cases in the country. Places like Israel have shown that their vaccinated population is holding the line, or at least seems to be. And this is part of the evidence that I'm sure the CDC is using in making their guidelines. As the CDC is creating guidelines for the United States specifically, and not like the whole, the World Health Organization, which has to look at all the countries around the world where there are a significant population of individuals not vaccinated at this point in time. Vaccinated individuals do seem to be overall protected. The risk to infection, even with the Delta variant, is drastically reduced compared to unvaccinated individuals. And so far, the cases that Israel are reporting, they are not reporting deaths. They're not getting into hospitalizations and deaths in the way that their earlier wave seemed to do. So at this point in time, there's still a low number of cases, very, very low, similar to last year around this time. And the United States also, cases have dropped around the country. But there are pockets where cases are starting to increase. Los Angeles is starting to recommend masks be worn again indoors. Oregon, we're looking good. Our cases are down. And today was the first day that we're supposedly open for business. The CDC in the United States is saying that states can make their own regulations. Localities can make their own regulations. But
so can businesses.
So can people.
So this is the other thing to remember is regardless of what the minimum threshold the federal or the state government has put out there, I don't think there's a, for instance, Davistown, right? I don't think there's a business in town you can walk into without a mask on, right? They still have it posted
very
out
variable.
front.
Yeah, I went shopping last weekend and went to 3 stores in a row, and 2 of them required me to wear a mask, and the third said, you can take your mask off if you're vaccinated.
So that kind of variability is part of the problem and the confusion, and what could also contribute to problems moving forward. So it is well documented at this point that masks do contribute to a reduction in transmission, even with vaccinated individuals. So even if you are vaccinated and you do get infected, if you wear a mask, you will be less likely to spread it to other people, even though you already have a reduced probability of spreading it to other people because you have less viral load. There are a lot of factors at play, but the one thing that we're learning is that masking is effective. And there is a study out of Duke University that found that that masking can prevent COVID-19 transmission in schools. They did a statewide analysis of the last year and what happened in schools with masking and no masking in the North Carolina school districts for K-12 education and charter schools. And their take-home message is that they don't necessarily have to close schools again, and they don't even necessarily have to provide 6 feet of distance for students as long as masks are involved.
Mm-hmm.
If masks are involved, the kids will be safe, and that they did not have transmission of virus when masks were included in schools.
I mean, and to all the people who, 18 months ago said, oh, kids will never wear masks.
Kids have learned great. They're doing a great job.
They're so adaptable, and some of them are doing better than their parents. They'll be like, "Mom, put your mask on." I think this is really great news for the kids. I think the thing that still kind of messes me up is that if I'm vaccinated and I get COVID, and I don't know I have COVID because I don't have symptoms because I'm vaccinated, but then somebody else nearby is not vaccinated, but is not wearing a mask for whatever reason, they can get COVID and get really, 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 really sick. Yeah. And for the 2 weeks before they get sick, they can then spread it to a bunch of other people. Yeah. And so I think this is the part that still is such a bummer, because we're all working off the honor system. And, at least in this country. And we have proven to not be stellar at the honor system in the past. And I think this is still kind of an issue. But, the other thing that I keep trying to remind myself is, at least a lot of countries, most countries, if you're leaving the US, they want a negative COVID test, regardless of your vaccination status, before you can enter their country. And at least as long as that holds, we can prevent more worldwide spread, like was happening at the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020, when nobody knew and it was just hopping all over the globe. So, what I really hope for COVID, for the future of COVID, at least from a worldwide scale, is that we don't drop those. I think that is really essential to preventing this from going absolutely crazy.
Yeah, monitoring, testing is a huge aspect to being able to keep it under control, especially with regard to things like the Olympics. And they've already had issues with athletes from different countries being tested when they arrive in Japan and finding that they are COVID positive and then having to quarantine. And so this is it's still a big deal. It's not as big a deal as it was in January when we were having a huge wave all over the place. Australia is going through it right now. It's their winter. They're in the middle of it and probably going to hit a pretty huge wave because they have a very large unvaccinated population, unless they maintain their strict quarantines, which a lot of areas are doing. And they're also installing travel mandates between different parts of Australia and New Zealand. So there are a lot of ways to manage the spread. But ventilation, masking, and vaccination is protective. You add the things together and they all reduce your risk. But I do hope that people in the Northern Hemisphere do enjoy a bit of their summer, because check the numbers in your local area. If you are vaccinated, you may get it, but you may not get it as badly. May not. The risk is lower. Outdoors is a lot safer than indoors. And summer is a wonderful time for outdoors. Keep testing. Keep doing these things. Thank you for being a part of this episode of This Week in Science. We appreciate the time you have taken to spend with us. If you do enjoy the show every single week, take a moment to go over to twis.org and click on our Patreon link. You can choose to support us at just about any level of your choosing, $10 and more per month. We will thank you by name at the end of the show. We really can't do this without you. Thank you for your support. So now we come back to wait, no, not
What?
Justin's. Wait,
Justin's
no, that was just
animal
1
corner.
week.
Isn't
No,
it? No, it's
wait.
mine. I won't want to give it back.
You don't want to give it back?
Hey, who's taking
It was
these controls?
never yours to take.
You know what it is, everybody. It's time for Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
Oh, I have some truly wild science. I'm pretty excited to tell you all about parasites that convince their host to go jump in a lake. So this is a study from Kobe University looking at a parasite that usually infects crickets and mantids. So they're called hair worms, which sounds so gross.
So gross. That's terrible.
And
Is it your hair or are they worms?
it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Anyway, they infect these insects and convince them to take a long swim and never come back. And so the way that they do that has always been kind of a weird phenomena. Like for over 100 years. This was discovered about 100 years ago, but they don't know how they make the insects do this. And where this gets weird is the fact that, so normally I would say, okay, killing your host is being a really bad parasite. But in the hairworm life cycle, they
Gotta get to the water.
Yes, they reproduce in water. So they are nematomorph parasites. They live inside insects, but they reproduce in rivers and ponds. So to get there, they manipulate their host to jump into the water and essentially kill themselves.
They whisper in their brains.
Yeah.
Go jump
Yes.
in a lake.
So this is what they sought out to do. How the heck are these hairworms convincing these animals that they're inside to kill themselves in water? This is crazy. And so what is the mechanism that's driving them towards water to take this forever dip? And so they had a theory, and I'll try to bring this from beginning to end so you can kind of follow me. So originally it was thought that it might have something to do with the reflected light on the surface of the water. But there are other forms of brightness in the wild. There's forest openings, there's sand, there's grasslands, there's things that reflect sunlight and moonlight. There's lots of reflective surfaces. So don't really think that's what it is. And if they were attracted to every single occurrence, this manipulation wouldn't work because it would only work, 1 out of 10 times or something like that. So it wouldn't effectively and consistently bring these hairworms home. So they thought that perhaps it had something to do with the polarization of the light. Polarized light is a type of light where the electric field of that light oscillates in only one direction. And the light reflected off water contains a lot of horizontally polarized light. And it has been shown in the past that arthropods use horizontally polarized light to seek or avoid water. So with this information, they know that water creates this horizontally polarized light. They also know that arthropods are capable of seeing and detecting that polarization. So those two things together, and especially the fact that these insects can use that information specifically related to water, means now we have a working theory. They have a hypothesis. Does the parasite use the animal's ability to see polarized light to make them go toward polarized light. So here's step one. They made a cylinder. They divided it into 3 sections. Polarized light on one end, unpolarized light on the other. The mantid was placed in the middle, and then they saw what happened 10 minutes later. And they moved towards the polarized light. Over the course of these tests, they used different strengths of light to see what strength of light was best. And they wanted to see if brightness had anything to do with it. So aside from the polarization, what about brightness? So they chose polarized light compared to uninfected individuals. When you have the infected ones, they went for the polarized light. And they found a particular type of light, about 2,000 lux, that was chosen as the best brightness for them. But then they double-checked it. They did not choose polarized light if the angle was vertical instead of horizontal. So it's definitely this horizontally polarized light. And the infected individuals are going after this, not the healthy ones. And this was regardless of strength of the light. They could change that all up and down, but they went for horizontal over vertical every time. And so, okay, yes, they are attracted to horizontally polarized light. Then they took it outdoors. They wanted to see whether infected mantids would jump into a pool reflecting strong horizontally polarized light. They set up a mesh enclosure. There were 2 pools. Pool A had the horizontally polarized but dim light, and Pool B, the reflection was brighter but weakly polarized. So they released them, poor buddies, in between the 2 and observed, quote unquote, their entry into the water. Sorry, buddies. And among the 16 infected mantids that exhibited the behavior, 14 entered Pool A, strongly reflected, horizontally polarized light. The other kind of funny thing is that they found that a lot of them did it at midday. So they were also in the initial experiment, they walked more in midday. So there is also some sort of circadian rhythm potentially related to this that has to do with the attraction to this horizontally polarized light or their activity in general. Who knows? But so there's something about the specificity of the time of day as well. So this is the first time in the world, according to the people who wrote this paper. So, maybe there's a little paper out there somewhere else. We never know, right, when people make these comments. But this is the first time in the world that parasites have been shown to manipulate the ability to respond to light. So this is a very specific behavior that they are impacting through their parasitization. So the next step of this is to actually figure out what the mechanism is. What are they manipulating in the body of these animals to have them react a certain way to a light source?
Yeah, what I think is so interesting about this is that this does hint at a mechanism. Instead of just saying, oh, the fungus makes the ant climb to the top of the tree and bite onto the tree until something eats it.
Yeah,
it's
zombie.
Right. This is actually the whole life cycle is kind of telling you, okay, this is what it's making it doing. And all these experiments are allowing them to figure out that it is polarized light. So now this actually gives us a direction that researchers can go, okay, polarized light. How do the mantids perceive the polarized light? What are the mechanisms in the eye for polarized differentiation at the molecular level between polarized and unpolarized light? How does the signal get interpreted by the mantid brain? And is it at the level of the brain or at the level of the eye that the parasite is having its effect?
Yeah, so is this impacting perception?
Right.
Or is it impacting response?
Yes.
Can they see the polarized light before, but they ignore it because water bad?
Right.
Or
That's kind of how that's how sort of like how I'm like seeing this too is that's just how they praying mantises see light and identify water. And so if that's the thing that they're being told to go to, that's already what they use to identify it, then they're going to. It's not necessarily that their eyes are getting tricked. It's still got to be a motivational response on some level.
And basically changing a motivational response. So like in the case of Toxoplasma gondii, where it makes an animal that normally does not go out into the daylight or is, isolated, seek out daylight and other organisms, cats, that would normally eat it.
Makes mice attracted to the sense of cat urine, and
but it's this
baby
friendliness.
hyenas not afraid of lions, and
yeah, but also like rabies, who makes you randomly hydrophobic.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's lots of mechanism-based questions here that could potentially be cracked at. So I thought just a wild idea to be able to look closer at this.
I love it. I love it when science can look at a question in animals and go, okay, let's start figuring it out. And they were able to the creativity to come up with experiments to solve this problem and to start asking these questions in the right way to be able to figure, this kind of stuff is so cool.
How best to drown a bunch of praying mantises without any confounding variables?
What are they looking at? What are they looking at more? Are they looking at me or do they look at the pond? Let's see. Indeed.
So speaking of water, let's instead move to fire.
Fire bad.
Fire is indeed bad. So this is very, I feel like a prescient conversation based on the conversation we were having earlier and what's going on on the West. Prescient. And anyway, this is a study from Washington State University, and this is looking at songbirds' response to wildfire. Is it their response in how they move around their environment? Is it their response in what they eat? No. This is the response in their plumage and hormones.
Ooh.
Yes. So just through kind of happenstance, just normal bird surveying stuff that you do if you study birds, it was discovered that habitat-destroying wildfires in Australia were followed by male red-backed fairy wrens not molting into their ornamental plumage. So most of the year they're this very kind of drab, good camouflage of brown. But normally when it's time to find a lover, or the other half of the genome of your babies, the males molt into a red and black ornamental plumage. So it's very striking. But that wasn't happening after some wildfires. Then they checked some hormone levels in these individuals and had found lower testosterone. So here's a question: is the testosterone is responsible for the feathers? So testosterone spike is what gives them their ornamental plumage. So are the wildfires suppressing testosterone, or are the wildfires impacting behavior that secondarily impact testosterone? This is the question, right? So they measured birds' fat stores, they measured their stress hormones, they measured a bunch of other things to see if anything else had to do with it. Because if you're super stressed after a wildfire, then that might suppress some of the more energetic, energetically expensive things that you might be doing, like, losing all your feathers and regrowing new ones.
Yeah.
So this is an important thing to count out, but it turned out that they were not stressed. They did not show stress hormones. That did not appear to have anything to do with it. It was only interfering with their testosterone and therefore their colorful plumage. So
that's wild.
Yeah.
So no stress hormones, just a change in testosterone levels. But you would expect that their testosterone levels would be changing because of the stress of the wildfire.
Right.
Right?
So while they were looking at wildfire impacts on long-term survival of birds, they kind of happened upon this and decided to really jump into it head on and try to figure out exactly what the mechanism here was. So the hypothesis was that testosterone is an evolved response to a wildfire. It was beneficial for these songbirds to suppress testosterone after a big catastrophic event like this. And that hypothesis comes because wildfires destroy their habitat, obviously. So it's not just that like, oh no, where am I going to live? It's no. There's no place to live. This is not the time to have a baby. So then the male birds inhibit or delay their breeding signals. They end up looking just like females when breeding season comes, so that they are then unattractive to females because they don't want to be tied down right now. So it's a response because the likelihood of expending energy into mating and then also taking care of a baby would probably end in bad things. It's a bad use of energy. So they might be better to wait till the next opportunity, the next year, essentially.
Right, because if there's a fire, perhaps it has reduced resources. Maybe it just all sorts of things are not going to go well for a clutch of eggs.
Yeah. And so they did a really thorough check. They looked at blood samples, and they did this for 5 years at 2 different sites, so they could compare birds living at times and places experiencing wildfire and not across these different locations, across different years. They looked at temperatures. They looked, like I said, at stress hormones. They looked at all these other things. And so it really just felt like the wildfire and not the dry season. It's not just it being dry and there not being a lot going on, like, oh, we are having a drought. No, it was specifically the wildfire that suppressed the testosterone, therefore suppressed feather color. And so really the expectation here is that it's male driven to reduce the amount of chicks that are born after a wildfire.
It's the selfish male hypothesis.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I just really need another year to find myself. That fire really was tough.
Yeah,
so.
I don't
be
really
tied
know
down.
if this is what I want to do this year. So
yeah. I really need to focus on me.
Maybe next year.
Yeah. Anyway, this story could be used for future implications on other species that have coloration signals to mating and places that historically didn't have wildfires that now may.
Yeah.
And another way that wildfire seasons mess up nature. Anyway, all of that. Climate change. Okay, that's it.
It's all connected, man.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
Totally.
Thank you for being a part of TWIS. Hey, did you want a TWIS t-shirt or mug? We have some cool sciencey goodness t-shirts and mugs in the store right now. So if you head over to twis.org and click the Zazzle link, you can check off purchasing them from your to-do list, but you can also check out the items that we have available and support TWIS in the meantime. Time for some stories from Justin. What you got going on?
Global warming.
Oh, great.
Talking about that.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Like, people are talking about how bad it is. We've been talking about how bad it is since before anybody else.
No, never.
Except for a few scientists we're talking about. We've been talking about this, like, weekly for many, many years now. But global warming might actually be good news for some California residents. New Cal Poly study finds that rattlesnakes are likely to benefit from the higher temperatures. Combination of factors makes warming climate beneficial to rattlesnakes. Rattlesnakes, by the way, are found in almost every part of the continental United States, but they're especially common in the Southwest. Rattlesnakes are experts at thermoregulation because, of course, they're cold-blooded. They don't really have a choice. They have to pay attention to these things. They found that when given a chance, I guess they had these snakes and they could sort of decide which, along a myriad of different temperature scenarios, where did they feel the most comfortable? Where did they most coalesce? And Turns out the rattlesnakes prefer a body temperature of 86 to 89 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's lower than I would have expected.
Well, but it's also much warmer than the averages that they will experience in nature. So average body temperature of a coastal rattlesnake was about 70 degrees. If they went inland, it was just 74. So, yeah, the higher the temperatures, the happier they are. Quotey voice, this is Haley Crowell. We were surprised to see how much lower the body temperatures of wild snakes were relative to their preferred body temperatures in the lab. There's a lot of ecological pressures in nature that could prevent rattlesnakes from basking. That's when they go and hang out in the sun, catch those rays. But when they're there, there's increased risk of exposure to predators. A warmer climate may help these snakes heat up to temperatures that are more optimal for digestion or reproduction. Crowell is a graduate student researcher and the project lead of this study. Longer periods of warmer temperatures could also give them a longer active season, giving them more time to hunt and feed and reproduce as well. So, because they don't regulate their own body temperature like a warm-blooded creature does, they need to rely on surroundings to provide heat, which usually drastically restricts their activity in cold weather. Remove the cold weather, and you have snakes that are not drastically reduced in their activity. They're just going to keep on keeping on. In addition to the seasonal changes,
keep on snaking.
Rattlers could spend more active hours during any given day being active. Mm-hmm. Rattlesnakes, they say here, eat mostly rodents, but can also eat insects. But apparently, we're going to try to avoid those black widows.
Yeah. Can I say one thing about this though? Is that active rattlesnakes are actually, if you're trying to not be bit as a human, it's actually kind of better. Most rattlesnake bites happen when you step on sleeping snakes. Okay. So when they're active, that's when, first of all, if they hear footfalls or feel footfalls, they're getting far, 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 far away. But secondly, they use the rattle. That's the whole point, right? Is you're too big. I don't want to bite you or eat you. Please leave me alone. So if they're awake and active, that actually means they're going to be more actively trying to keep away from you, which is helpful.
Okay. So there is a silver lining to global warming then. Less likely to be bit by a snake because they're more active and awake.
Yes. However, you have rattlesnakes now probably moving into places where people are not used to rattlesnakes, and so they don't know rattlesnake etiquette. So for that reason, they might actually be more likely to get bitten.
But what you described,
humans moving into areas where, so there's that both going in each direction. Humans are going to get bitten more often. That's what's going to happen.
What you described, Blair, perfectly illustrated my one time almost getting bit by a rattlesnake.
You almost stepped on a sleeping one? Yeah.
It was at night, and this is how country I grew up. We had a crushed granite path from the trailer to the outhouse, which was enough distance away from the trailer so that, it was far enough away. And along this crushed granite path, at night, I went walking because in the middle of the night, I had to do number 2.
Oh, no.
This is me at like 7 or 8 years old, or maybe younger. Gosh. And then there was this bunch of stick or something. There was a bunch of debris, and I was about to kick it off of the path because it's night, but granite's kind of light colored, so you could see the contrast. I was about to kick it when something in the back of my head clicked, and it was, that's a coiled up rattlesnake, which
Don't
was
kick
there
that thing.
At night on the granite path because it was using that heat from the path. Oh, but you're right. Yeah, if it was warmer, it probably would have been I don't need a granite path. I could be anywhere. I wouldn't have.
So if you're in rattlesnake territory, let me just give, since we're talking about it, a couple pointers here. So if you're on hikes, first of all, never wear open-toed shoes on a hike. Wear closed-toed shoes. Second of all, stay on the trail. There's a million reasons to do that, but this is a big one. And then the third is, if you think you're moving through a space where there could be snakes, you stop. You take big stomping steps because that will wake them up. That will give a nice vibration, and they're going to get the heck out of there.
Very good tips. But one of the so anyway, the silver lining of this story is they're saying that there's a bubble of an ecosystem that's going to really enjoy global warming, and it's going to be snakes and vultures.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. But if you are in the dark, what do you need to be looking at, Justin? Anything?
Oh, this is a buried the lead. This is the biggest story, I think, of the week, if not the year so far.
Uh-oh.
Researchers at Chalmers University of Technology, Sweden, they succeeded in developing a method to label mRNA molecules and follow the path of mRNA through cells in real time using basically a microscope without affecting the properties or subsequent activity, protein formation of those mRNA. This is a breakthrough that is going to have game-changing effects on all sorts of research. So most of us are now kind of familiar with mRNA. We got the major vaccines that thanks to science and RNA, we have the Pfizer and the Moderna are mRNA-based vaccines. RNA-based therapeutics actually have a whole bunch of things that they're working on that are opportunities to prevent, treat, potentially cure many, many diseases. Currently, though, delivery of RNA therapeutics into cells is pretty inefficient, mostly because we don't really know what we're doing in the research. What we get are snapshots of given time points where we can go and look at something and see, okay, did the mRNA get there? How much of it's there compared to what else is there? But this is an active, ongoing system, so when you have your time points for research and you have to kill the cell to find out what's going on in it, you end what was happening in that cell, and you have to kind of string it together with a bunch of other dead cells that you killed at different times to try to build the picture. It lacks some important details about what's going on, but it can also create inaccurate data that then frustrates scientific progress and process, right? Esbjornar, associate professor of the Department of Biology and Biotechnology, who is the second lead author of the article. The great benefit of this method is that we can now easily see where in the cell the delivered mRNA goes and in which cells the protein is formed, without losing RNA's natural protein translating ability. New method, recently presented in the Journal of American Chemical Society, will make the development of new treatments more efficient, as well as add a wealth of knowledge to pathologists, biotech engineers, anyone who's interested in studying physiological processes in cells, whether they be human or plant. It's huge.
That's amazing.
We've known for a while that mRNA plays a lot of regulatory roles within cells and within processes. But again, without the ability to sort of observe how they're going, where they are, what they're doing, it's sort of been a mystery. We can attach some importance to the presence or lack of presence. But the research behind this method was done in collaboration with chemists and biologists at Chalmers, that's the Swedish Technical University, and the pharmaceuticalists at AstraZeneca, which is interesting because you hear AstraZeneca and you go, aha, they made a vaccine. Yeah, it's the company that made the vaccine. But they're actually, even though their vaccine is not mRNA based, the company is actually one of the leading mRNA therapy researchers in other arenas. So they're part of this for a good reason. The method involves replacing one of the building blocks of RNA with a fluorescent variant, which apart from that, everything else remains the same. Natural properties, does the thing the mRNA did before. Fluorescent units can then be used to produce the messenger RNA without affecting them being translated into proteins. They can then allows the researchers to follow functional mRNA molecules in real time, seeing how they are taken up into cells just the help of a microscope. So this is
Yeah.
But it's thought to be, it's believed to be, mRNA is one of those things between genome as a blueprint and epigenetic outcomes. And this is long thought to be where a lot of that regulatory aspect of expression is actually controlled in a weird way. So being able to finally visualize it means the whole genomic field also gets to take a big step forward with new research. Huge.
Yeah. We like to see things. Visualization is amazing. That's big. Cool story. I like it. I'm going to take us into some microbes and into your gut for a moment, and then into your brain, because I like to do stuff like that. So apparently, according to some new research out of an international research team, this is Singaporeans, researchers in the UK, Australia, Canada, US, and Sweden, led by principal investigator Professor Sven Petersen, National Neuroscience Institute of Singapore, and visiting professor at Lee Kong Chan School of Medicine in Nanyang Technological University. They've looked at gut microbes that metabolize tryptophan. Nice amino acid that is supposed to make us sleepy. That's supposed to be in the turkey at Thanksgiving. That's really not the thing that makes you sleepy with the turkey at Thanksgiving, but we like to say it anyway.
Which you remind me every Thanksgiving because I forget it from year to year.
It's like the turkey. It's not really the turkey.
It's like a
eating
piece
lot
of
food.
locked-in information that refuses to leave my brain.
Yes. Well, hopefully this study will lock itself into your brain. Really amazing. These microbes, usually the groups of microbes are microbes that can be dangerous to humans, pathogenic microbes like E. coli. These microbes metabolize tryptophan and secrete little molecules that are called indoles. And these indoles, apparently, we don't know whether they actually do travel through the bloodstream between the gut and the brain, but indoles, according to this study, they mediate the development of new brain cells in the hippocampus. So these indoles trigger the birth of new brain cells in an area of your brain that's responsible for forming new memories and helping your cognition. So you can already see where this is going with its implications for how tryptophan or bacteria, or even, imagine this, just indoles, could be used to fight the ravages of aging on the brain. You can continue to stimulate the birth of new brain cells. These indoles, they mediate signals that lead to regulatory factors that lead to the production of these new brain cells, the neurogenesis in the hippocampus. And this is published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The researchers do wonder, is this the kind of thing that could lead to dietary intervention? Could you also just eat tryptophan-rich food if you have these bacteria? But knowing that these bacteria are usually pathogenic species of bacteria, do we really want to feed them all that much?
Yeah.
So could we just go for...
If it gets you a better brain, I take a shot. I need the help.
Let's go there.
I do.
But there are many indole-rich foods. Broccoli, cauliflower, the brassicas, these cabbages, they are rich in indoles. And so perhaps eating indole-rich foods are what can help keep your brain happy and healthy into long age. We don't know this for sure yet, but it sure is a nice thought.
I love it.
But
I'm going to go buy so much broccoli. Yeah. Which also, isn't broccoli a derivative of mustard? So then just put mustard on your broccoli. You should be good.
Yes. All the mustard, all the broccoli.
Sound very good.
Mustard covered
and then
cauliflower.
sprinkle some pathogens on top of it with a slice of turkey, and you have the recipe for the perfect brain.
Yes, exactly. You need the microbes, though, that are in there. But it's very exciting new neuroscience research that could potentially shift not just how we eat for old age, but it could understanding these mechanisms of new neuron formation, could lead to treatments for stroke and brain injury.
Oh, yeah.
Which would be
Yes. That's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah. Could. These are all far off possibilities at this point in time. Speaking of, I don't know, this isn't like a near possibility, but have you ever boiled a lobster?
No.
I've been present, but I've never done it myself.
Right. So, yeah, lobsters, we catch them, people put them in the pot, and there's this question as to whether or not they feel pain. Now, as researchers, neuroscientists, and perceptual researchers will tell you, there's no way to know if they actually feel pain as we define it. But
they have nerves.
They have nerves, and of course, they have probably mechanisms and temperature sensors that allow them to stay out of too hot waters. They don't get boiled naturally. Anyway, this work out of UCSD in pharmacology, biochemistry, and behavior investigated the question of what happens if you give lobsters THC pot, not just put them in a pot, but if you give them THC
yes, I see.
before you put them in the pot, does that change the way that they act as they are boiling?
I would imagine.
I would imagine no. I think if you took a completely sober human, if they were trying to bridge this sort of morphophysition thing going on, and somebody who's very stoned, and you threw both of them in boiling water, I bet they both scream.
Yes. And it appears as though that's what happens with lobsters as well, except none of the screaming, just the THC does appear to enter the lobster through the gills. They did tissue analysis to see whether the THC had actually made its way into the lobster. And yes, indeed, lobsters can inhale. And the lobsters then, their behavior does change. So their claw waving and their various behaviors do change as a result of the change in THC levels in their tissues. However, when boiled in a pot of water, the THC did not seem to change their behavior in any way.
Right.
Thank you, Eknap49 in the chat room. So how do you want your lobster? Baked or boiled? Both. What? Both.
Yeah, both.
Baked
Yes.
and boiled.
Oh boy.
Yes. So
what a wild study. My thing is, I understand. It just feels like people want to feel less guilty about you,
and that's where it came from. So the rationale their study, vapor exposed to delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, slows locomotion of the Maine lobster, Homarus americanus. Rationale: despite long history of use in synaptic physiology, the lobster has been a neglected model for behavioral pharmacology. A restaurateur proposed that exposing lobster to cannabis smoke reduces anxiety and pain during the cooking process. It is unknown if gill respiration in air would result in significant THC uptake and whether this would have any detectable behavioral effects.
I love this. This sounds like the restaurateur was walked in on. He's like, "What are you doing in here? You're supposed to be cooking the lobsters." He's like, "I'm part of the process. I swear."
I'm trying to help the lobsters here.
Well, this is this is not too far of a cry from a range, cage-free range animals. I guess this was your meal was raised on an organic farm where it had plenty of room to run around. It was fed nothing but organic food and the very best marijuana that we could possibly supply it. And
at least it was entirely confused before it went into the pot.
Just so you know, if you didn't eat this, it wasn't going to do anything with its life. It was a procrastinator.
Yeah. So according to science, if you are cooking lobster, it's not necessarily going to benefit the lobster once it's in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thought you should know. There you go. And there we go. Have we come to the end of another episode?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Blair says, oh, yeah, we're done
yeah.
already.
We did it.
We're all done. All right. Well, if you have any questions for us out there, you can send emails to Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, or you can leave us a message on our Facebook page, This Week in Science. Thank you. I hope you're all staying cool wherever you are. I hope you are vaccinated if you can be. I hope you are staying safe. And thank you for listening to the show. Thank you to Fada for your help with social media and show notes. Thank you to Gord for helping with the chat rooms. Identity4, thank you for recording the show. And Rachel, thank you for your amazing assistance. And for all of our wonderful Patreon sponsors out there, I would love to say thank you for all of your support on Patreon. Thank you to Pierre Velazarb, Ralphie Figueroa, John Ratnaswamy, Kira, Carl Kornfeld, Melanie Stegman, DeCramsta, Karen Tozzi, Woody MS, Andre Bassett, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vigard Chefstad, Hal Snyder, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Maddie Perrin, Gaurav Sharma, Shubrew, Don Mundus, Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Prentice 104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Bass, Joshua Fury, Shauna Nina Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Gene Tellier, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Kevin Railsback, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Mark Massaros, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood. This profile name is hilarious in the context of some other podcast. Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Matt Sutter, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Mountain Sloth, Jim Drapeau, Sarah Chavez, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Stanton, Paul Disney, Patrick Pecoraro, Tony Steele, Ulysses Adkins, Brian Condren, and Jason Roberts. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if you are interested in supporting us on Patreon, head over to TWIS and click on the Patreon link. On next week's show,
we will be... Are we coming back next week, too? Are we going to do it again?
Well,
Okay,
right?
well, then I guess we'll be back Wednesday again at 8 p.m. Pacific Time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook channels, as well as twist.org/live.
Hey, do you want to listen to us as a podcast? Maybe make a souffle while you listen? Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, you can get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories are available on our website, www.twist.org, and you can also sign up for a newsletter.
You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair, me, at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into a snake inside of a spider in Australia.
It was sucked by next to a neutron star into a black hole.
Yeah.
That was smoking the good stuff with a lobster.
Yeah.
Moments before being boiled to death.
Uh-huh.
Where you can also ping us on the Twitter, where we are at Twist Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
Hey, and if you learned anything from the show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science. This Week